It's 2 o'clock. One other person has joined us, so we've got a small class here today. So we'll do something called the 7 Factors of Awakening, which is a really useful teaching for insight meditation. And so the first of those 7 factors is mindfulness. And in the meditation that we've been doing in this class, we begin by doing mindfulness of the breath. We do a shift. When I lead the meditation, I do a shift from thinking to sensing, where you bring your attention into all the sensations of the body and the sounds. And, thoughts may be there coming and going, but you don't get engaged with them. You just let them float by and you stay with the sensations that are present. And then you eventually settle your focus on the breath, all the sensations of the breath going in and out. And the reason that you do this is because this is how you create conditions for mindfulness to arise. And that's the first of these 7 factors of awakening, is to create conditions for mindfulness to arise. You can't, be mindful. You can't say, I'm going to be mindful. You have to allow mindfulness to arise. And this is the way we do it, with this simple process that we do of watching the breath. While you're watching the breath, you may get pulled away or lost in thought. And in this stage of the meditation, what you do is you just note thinking, relax and release that thought and go back to the breath in a very gentle, easygoing way. Everything relaxed, everything calm. You just keep doing that over and over again. You bring your attention back to the breath. You stay with the breath. We use noting of in on the in breath and out on the out breath to stay connected to the breath. But you just stay with the breath. And then if you get distracted, that's fine. You just note thinking, and then release and relax and go back to the breath. And that's what we do for the first part of the meditation. And the point of that is to develop this first factor of awakening, which is mindfulness. And it's fairly effective. If you do this, if you do meditation almost daily, nobody can do it every day, but if you do it almost daily and you get into a regular practice, you will find that when you do this practice, mindfulness does arise. You get a certain amount of calm and steadiness of mind and clarity of mind that arises just from this simple process of staying with the breath. So this is like the first half of the meditation. And then you begin to do the second factor of awakening, which is called investigation. Or a formal name is like investigation of Dhamma. And what you're doing with that is you're allowing your attention to move to other objects besides the breath. Whereas before we were just staying with the breath and just noting thinking if something pulled us away. In this second phase of the meditation, and when I lead the meditation, I'll tell you when to shift phases. But you go to that. If there's a persistent object that's been coming up frequently, or a strong energy that comes up in your meditation, or something that you've been noticing has been coming up, you can momentarily drop the breath deliberately and move your attention to that, make that the new object of your meditation. And it may be something like you're rehashing an old conversation you had that made you angry, or it may be something that you're worrying about, or you may be having a fantasy of a trip to Hawaii, or whatever it is. You'll give it a label. And for example, if it was you were rehashing a conversation that you had before that was making you angry, you can just say, anger has arisen. And it's important to do it in that form rather than saying, I am angry. Because when you say anger has arisen, the intention of that is to separate from it, to disidentify from it. It's not you, it's just something that has arisen in your mind. Anger has arisen. So that's the first step of working with any kind of energy that comes up. You give it a label, note what it is, and note that this state of mind has arisen. The next thing you can do is to note where you are seeking happiness. And usually you can see, you don't have to get involved in the storyline, but you can stay back from the storyline, but you can still see that involved in this long, complicated storyline is this basic thing of, maybe your ego was insulted, or maybe you're worried about some kind of thing. It's just worry. So you're seeking happiness in getting these things the way you want them to be. The very top level, when everything is said and done, when the whole story is put aside, what's really going on is there's something that you want to be a certain way. And all these strong energies are rising as a function of the struggles to get those things to arise and be that way. Our life is a long process of trying to arrange the world the way we want it to be. And this is how it shows up in the meditation. It shows up as these strong energies. So you notice the energies that are there. You notice where you're seeking happiness. And the third thing you can do is to notice what qualities of mind are coming up and what is the experience of these qualities of mind. If it's anger, you might find that the experience of anger is a tightness, tension, a sense of struggle, or a sense of unease. There's all kinds of experiences associated with that. And so you can feel that kind of release. In the seeing, that's the theory behind this whole process, is that in the seeing, there comes a kind of release, a sort of letting go, which happens in this process. And as it lets go, and as the story fades and the whole energy fades, you can go back to the breath. So that's the way the second phase of this meditation goes on. And if any time that you get agitated or stirred up by this process, you can always just go back to just focusing on the breath and letting yourself quiet down again. And then you can open up again. So it's a process of the initial part of the meditation where we're developing this first foundation of mindfulness. This first factor of awakening. I'm mixing up my labels. But anyway, the first of the two factors of awakening are mindfulness and investigation. The first is this developing mindfulness with this steady process of mindfulness of breath. And the second is investigation with this process that I just described. So those are these first two of the 7 factors of awakening. The third one is called energy or effort. And what this means is that where in that investigation phase you have identified qualities of mind that have arisen, you reflect on the difference between skillful and unskillful qualities of mind. And we've talked about that in the class. A skillful quality of mind is a quality of mind that leads to calm and a peaceful mind and non-harming, whereas unskillful qualities of mind lead to a stirred up mind, agitated mind, and harm. So you can tell the difference after you do this for a while. It'll become pretty obvious what's a skillful state of mind and what's an unskillful state of mind. And as you see states of mind coming up that are either skillful or unskillful, you begin to reflect on how the unskillful states of mind can be released and allowed to fade, and how the skillful states of mind can be strengthened. An example of that is something that we did last week, where we did metta meditation. We did a little bit of metta meditation phrases. Whereas, for example, if during the meditation, if you were getting into anger or something, ill will, you can say a few metta phrases for whatever was the source of that ill will, or the person that you were angry with. You can just say, May you be happy, may you be peaceful, may you live with ease. And just say that a few times just to sort of give some support to developing the skillful state of mind. And that's always what the effort is, which is this third factor of awakening. And it's also one of the steps in the Noble Eightfold Path is right effort. And this is how you bring right effort to this particular moment of the meditation. And the next one, the fourth of these factors of awakening, is called joy. And joy arises with the skillful qualities of mind. As you are able to cultivate skillful qualities of mind and let go of the unskillful qualities of mind, the natural arising from that is joy. It's the joy of letting go, the joy of release from the struggles and the tensions that come from all of this. And this can arise as you work with these qualities of mind, the skillful and the unskillful. And the fifth of these factors of awakening, after joy, the fifth factor is tranquility, which is what arises with the arising of joy. Is your body calms down a little bit, it quiets down, your mind quiets down, things get a little more peaceful. And this is not something that you try to make happen, it's just what naturally happens as a course of this process that you're doing. And as you develop this meditation, if you do it on a regular basis and develop a meditation practice, this process naturally sort of unfolds. So that's the first 5 of these factors of awakening. So the 6th one is concentration. And in the meditation process that we just described, we did 2 different kinds of concentration. In the first half of the meditation, where we were just doing mindfulness of the breath, coming back to the breath every time we got distracted, we're doing what is called single-pointed concentration. And single-pointed concentration is a good way to calm things down. It's a good way to develop a certain stability of mind. And that's why we do that, because with that stability of mind arises mindfulness. And that's what we had intended to do, is get some mindfulness going. So as we develop this mindfulness, as we develop this investigation, the joy and the effort and the concentration develops. With that, we come to the last step of these 7 factors, which is equanimity. And equanimity is, there's a Buddhist teaching called the 8 worldly winds. I don't know if you've ever heard that teaching before, but it's the 8 worldly winds are gain and loss, pleasure and pain, fame and ill repute, and praise and blame. So when you're looking at those, you will see that it's 4 different pairs. And each pair is something that we find pleasurable, something that we find nice, and the other is something that we find unpleasant or something we don't like. So equanimity is to really recognize that each of these 8 qualities are not reliable sources of happiness and peace of mind. So we have, if we're doing this and there's something pleasant that comes into our life, that we may have a tendency to try to hang on to that. If there's something unpleasant, we may try to push that away. Fame and ill repute. We like the fame, we push away the ill repute. So with equanimity, you find a balance of mind which isn't tossed around by either one of these. We're not drawn, so grasping after the pleasant, and we're not pushing away the unpleasant. We're just able to be steady with those. There's a derivations of the words that the quality equanimity comes from, which is the Pali words. And one of those words means kind of looking over something. So you're sort of, you're able to see clearly and see what's going on. And the other one means to stand in the middle. So again, it's just like if you consider yourself sitting in a meditation posture with all these things swirling around you, you're sitting and stable and steady, and as all these things come. So that's what equanimity is. And it's a very valuable quality to cultivate. And that's the 7th of the factors of awakening. So any questions about that? You're the only one left here, Daniel. So if whatever you want to ask, go right ahead.
How does equanimity differ from tranquility? I think the two seem kind of similar to me.
No, tranquility is just the calming of mind that arises naturally from the joy. But equanimity arises from wisdom, because you're seeing something very important, which is this idea that, okay, this pleasant thing, you have pleasure and pain. The way we normally are is pleasant is a source of happiness. I want to get as much pleasure as I can. Unpleasant is a source of unhappiness. I want to get rid of it. And that's what generates our endless struggles and endless agitation and dukkha. The Pali word dukkha is the word for our endless sort of hamster in the wheel efforts to get the world arranged to be the way I want it as a source of happiness. And equanimity is recognizing that doesn't work. So it arises from wisdom, whereas the tranquility really arises from a combination of the mindfulness, the skillful qualities of mind that are arising, and just the general calm that comes with the concentration. All these things contribute to the tranquility. And now these, with these things, I always talk about energizing factors and tranquilizing factors. And the investigation, the energy and the joy are considered energizing factors. And the tranquility and the concentration and equanimity are considered to be stabilizing factors. And the mindfulness, which is the one, the sort of the odd man out for that, is the one that keeps them all in balance. So that's the importance of the mindfulness, is it keeps us on the right track in terms of balancing all of these they're all skillful qualities, but they can get out of balance if we, for example, too much energy can agitate the mind. So we need to balance that with tranquility and concentration. And joy, joy is actually considered to be an energizing factor. Most people think of joy as, wonderful joy, peaceful. But actually, joy is an energizing factor and needs to be balanced with a tranquility. So did that make sense? Any other questions about that process?
Yeah,
we asked the question at the beginning, how do you keep from getting caught up in the things that you make objects of meditation? And when you get to the point where you're going to make something an object of meditation, how do you keep from getting caught up in that? And the answer is that you do these steps I talk about, where you look at things from the highest level possible. You're not getting into the details of the storyline, but you're recognizing the essence of that storyline, which is holding on, or the essence of that which might be, something that is pushing away. You want to get rid of something, or something that's fear. There's fear that's arising. And that fear is just, fear can be holding on, but it can also just be a general unease of uncertainty, the uncertainty of the world. And you can just feel yourself not being comfortable with the uncertainty. And that's one of the skillful qualities of mind, is comfort with uncertainty, because that's possible. It doesn't have to be, uncertainty doesn't have to be scary. It can be once you get used to sort of riding along with life, it can be fine, even though there is uncertainty there. So it's just a question of learning to work at the very highest level of what's coming up, not getting into the details of the storyline.
Great. Yeah, that'll be good to practice. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what we're doing, and we can try a meditation now, and just do just what we were talking about. I'll do the meditation the way, this is the way I normally do meditation every day, the kind of practice that I do. So yeah, get comfortable, and I guess you use a meditation. You use one of those benches?
Yeah, I have a old Zazen bench here. So.
Oh, well, those are good. Yeah, I've got one of those as well. I don't use it anymore because my knees won't let me use it anymore, but I used to use it.
It helps with the posture, that's for sure.
No, it's very good for posture. Yeah, there came a time when I couldn't bend my knees for extended periods of time anymore without them freezing up.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that for a while, but it'll get you when you get to your 60s or so. So anyway, so yeah, just get comfortable. And I always say to do a shift from thinking to sensing. And start with the sounds around you, the body sensations, you can see thoughts are there, they're coming and going, but just leave them aside. There may be moods, emotions, anything that's there, just put it aside and just stay with the sensations in the body. If your shoulders are stiff, you can let them relax, your face relax, your jaw. If your jaw is tight, you can allow it to relax. And just get comfortable and the right balance between being alert and being relaxed. So you stay alert and don't fall asleep, but you don't get stiff. And you stay comfortable, because comfort's important. Just notice what's there without any judgment about it. Just notice what's there. So then you can let your attention sort of drift to the breath, incline towards the breath. Let the other things, all the other sensations and sounds and things kind of fade in the background. They'll still be there, but just leave them in the background. And more, bring your focus to the breath. Now there's some tools that you can use to hold your attention on the breath. You can use a mental note of in on the in-breath, silent mental note, in on the in-breath, silent mental note of out on the out-breath. Just continue that, just to keep you connected to the breath. If at any point you get distracted and lost in thought, then just note thinking. Release and relax and go back to the breath. If there are thoughts there that are not strong enough to pull you away from breath, just leave them in the background. You don't have to do anything with them. Just let them float by. Sounds, you can just let them float by. On those days when your mind seems to be extra busy, you can add a breath counting to the mix. Just on an out breath, you count 1. Next out breath, count 2. Next out breath, count 3. 4. 5. Now go back to 1. And just cycle through 1 to 5 every 5 breaths. If you need even more support, you can note 1 on the out breath and 1 on the in breath, 2 on the out breath, 2 on the in breath. Cover everything. And so now you can allow your awareness to open up a little bit. If there's other things that are coming up, it's perfectly fine to just to stay with the breath the way we have been for the whole meditation. But if there's things that are coming up that are making themselves more obvious as time goes on, strong energies or persistent energies, you can momentarily drop the breath and bring your attention to those things. Fully bring your attention to those energies that have come up and give it that label, like anger has arisen or worry has arisen, or just it can be anything, whatever it is. It can be fantasy has arisen. Just give it a label like that. And then notice, what in this story are you seeking happiness from? What part of the world are you trying to arrange here? And what does it feel like to try to arrange the world in this way? You can notice if there's skillful or unskillful qualities of mind that are arising with this energy. Fear or anger, ill will. Maybe something good is coming up. Maybe loving kindness or compassion is coming up. If that's what it is, then notice that. Just see what's there. If there's something that you can do to give some support to a skillful quality of mind, as I say, you can do some metaphrases, or sometimes you can just say a single word, like if it's been grasping after something, just say the word contentment and feel what is the experience of the word contentment or ease. What does it feel like to contemplate ease, and how that would be different than what you have in this energy that was coming up? So you can work with the energy and at some point it may sort of fade away and then you just go back to the breath. Just go back to your noting in and out of the breath. Settle back into just the mindfulness of the breath until something else comes up, or maybe the same thing might come back, and then just do the same process all over again. And that's just the whole cycle of the meditation. You can see the whole arising of these whole 7 factors. The arising of the energy, the arising of the joy, the arising of the tranquility, the arising of the concentration, and maybe the arising of the equanimity. You don't have to make any of these things happen. You just see what's there and see if they happen or not. That's fine either way. All these things just arise when conditions are right for them to arise. Okay, we can end the meditation there. Just relax and see what it feels like when the meditation ends. So how did that work as far as a way of working with things that come up in the meditation?
Yeah, I think it worked pretty well. I stuck more with the feeling and the perception of what was
Mhm.
coming up, and really didn't get into thinking about the past or how it got there or what I was going to
Yeah,
do.
it's the experience of what's coming up that's important. Not this, the storyline is a thing that's not important, but the experience of it is what's important. Because with that, you really become more and more familiar with the experience of an unskillful quality of mind or the experience of a skillful quality of mind. And that's the key insight that comes out of this, and how the
Mm.
unskillful arise and how the skillful arise. And so that's all the insights that we're looking for from this. And none of it is in the storyline, none of it is in the content. It's all in the experience. So it's a training to stay with that experience. And the interesting thing is that you can actually do this. This is the meditation process that we're talking about, but you can do this at any time. This whole thing that we've just gone through, you can do it. It's good to start it with simple things like washing dishes or cleaning the house or something like that. But in the process, like for example, if you were washing dishes, that's a very sort of defined process. And if you look at it, it's really no different than this process of watching the breath. And, you know, you can be washing the dishes and your mind gets pulled away. You can note thinking and then go back to washing the dishes just in the exact same way as you go back to the breath. And when things come up while you're washing dishes, you can work with them in the same way that you did. Because in washing dishes, you can establish quite a bit of mindfulness and quite a bit of calm. And then you can use that mindfulness and calm to investigate in just the same way other things that come up when other times than when you're meditating. So this is a universal process. We talk about it in terms of meditation because the meditation is like the training in the gym. It's what you do to develop the skills, but it can be applied anywhere. And you know, we think of mindfulness, but mindfulness comes from this process that we described in the meditation, but it also comes from things like following the ethical path of Buddhism and developing a certain amount of simplicity and contentment in your life and bringing skillful qualities to your life. All these things also create conditions for mindfulness. So mindfulness comes from a lot of sources, but this particular meditation process is the way that we think of it, where we deliberately sitting here creating conditions for mindfulness to arise. So I
As
think it all
you
works pretty well.
as you start to know what the experience of skillful and unskillful actions feels like, um, is the thought that you tend to be more familiar with those experiences, and then when unskillful experiences arise, you can more readily transform those into skillful processes.
Yeah, it's the familiarity with the skillful and with the unskillful. The fact that the unskillful, what they feel like is not what the way we want to feel.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really are very angry, it's not a pleasant experience. It's a very unpleasant experience. But most people, when they're very angry, they're not in touch with their body. They're not in touch with the experience of being angry. Totally lost in the storyline that made them angry. So we're shifting that. So you really get into the experience of being angry. And the more you're into the experience, the less you want to be there, the less you want to go there, because you recognize how unpleasant is the experience of being angry. So again, it's nothing that you're doing, it's just seeing, it's just recognizing, experiencing, and being with these things. And from that seeing naturally arises the changes that you would like to have. But you can't change deliberately. I can't say, I'm not going to get angry. But you can get much more experience with what the experience of anger is, and that tends to make you get angry less, because and nothing is like an overnight transformation here. It's just a gradual seeing things and a gradual growing of wisdom, which means that you do things differently over time, and gradually your whole way of being. And the end result is seeking happiness and peace of mind in other places than arranging the world to be the way we want it to be. We recognize the fact that we all need to do a certain amount of arranging just to take care of our lives. We all need, food, clothing, and shelter, and the basic necessities of life. But beyond that, a lot of the seeking to arrange things is counterproductive to our happiness and peace of mind. And so we begin to do less of that and more seeking happiness in things like I say, leading a life that doesn't require us to seek so many outside things, seeking more internal sources of joy and happiness. And that's what the meditation does. Meditation itself is an internal source of happiness and joy. And those kinds of things where we seek, we just end up seeking happiness in different places than we did before. And in places where happiness can more securely be found, rather than in impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self things, is where it's not very successful, not very secure for us to seek happiness in those kinds of places. So we gradually transform the way we deal with the world, including the whole Eightfold Path. And so we but it's something that comes around naturally.
I found that when I first started daily meditation, I thought I was pretty good and I knew how I felt. But I realized that many times throughout my day, I'll kind of feel off or have something negative. And I wasn't even aware of the reasons why I felt that way. And I think meditating daily has helped me to look at that more directly in the eye and be more aware of how I'm feeling and maybe where that's coming from. And with that, I think the level of anger that I have on a daily basis has gone down, because maybe that was hiding other things that I was feeling.
Right.
That I wasn't ready to look at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you do the meditation, it's the mindfulness you develop in the meditation carries over to a certain extent to the rest of your life. The more meditation you do, the more that happens. So your mindfulness in your life as a whole will improve. And if your mindfulness improves as a whole, you'll see more than you were seeing before. And also, learning the teachings is important as well, because you start to know what to look for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you know about impermanence and unsatisfactoriness and not self and things like that, when those things pop up, you recognize it and see it. And so that is the whole process. They say that the process of Buddhism is you hear the teachings and then you think about them intellectually, but then you have to experience them through the meditation and the training. You need all three of those steps. So it's good to know the teachings, but just knowing the teaching doesn't do it. You've got to actually experience them. And it's the meditation and the mind training that teaches you how to experience them. So, but if you do that, then it starts to make sense. Yeah. How long have you been meditating?
For about a year now, I've made it a daily practice.
Good.
I've been, interested in Buddhism since about 2006, but it was very off and on. And I found that with the daily practice, it's almost a whole new thing and getting benefits from it that I wasn't familiar with. So,
Yeah, no, that's, but it only comes with daily practice. The off and on never does it, unfortunately.
and
I
it's
mean,
gotten so much easier too. At first, I thought, how am I going to fit 20 minutes in on a daily basis? But you just get in the habit of it, and
yeah,
it's almost doing itself for you. If you skip it, that's when you feel a little bit off.
yeah. And if you, like when I did this meditation today, I talked about, monitoring the breath, and I talked about noting in and out, and I also talked a little bit about counting. What methods do you use to sort of in that initial stage when you're just staying with the breath? Do you use any of those methods, or do you use just watching the breath without any noting or at all? Or what do you normally do?
For me, it kind of depends on the day and what seems to work the best at that moment. So many times I'll just kind of focus on the breath and um, know that it's an in breath or an out breath, and a long and a short. And then some days it's a little more difficult, and I'll do the counting. Um,
Okay.
I'd counted up to 10 before, but I liked your recommendation to count up to 5 before restarting. I'm not sure
Well,
why that worked a little better for me today.
well, it depends, individual thing. I like 5 just because that's what I found works for me, but other people do very well with 10. So it depends on your own mind and how you're going to be. There's no right or wrong in any of this. It's just whatever works. All these things are very practical. And there's a million ways of counting. Like I count, 1 on the out breath, and then I can count 1 on the in breath and 2 on the out breath, 2 on the in breath. Other people do it the reverse. They count, 1 on the in breath, then 1 on the out breath. So they reverse what I do, or, there's a million different ways to do the counting, but I don't think it makes much difference. I think it's just the basic regularity of it is what keeps your mind. Because I do counting a lot, because often when I sit down, my mind will be kind of busy. And the solution to that, for me, seems to be counting. And then at some point, I'll drop the counting and just either go to noting or just watching the breath without any noting at all. But and there are some days when I just stick with the breath for the whole time. I don't really do much other things, but other times that I have a lot of going on, and then there's a lot to work with. And so I work with it in the way we described as the second half of the meditation, opening up the awareness. And I don't know if I mentioned when I was talking about concentration, did I talk about the difference between single pointed and momentary concentration?
You circled back to that, I think, later on in the talk about the single pointed concentration.
Well,
What was the momentary concentration?
okay, momentary concentration is what we're doing in the second half. So when we're doing the breath only, that's single pointed because there's one point of concentration, which is the breath, the sensations of the breath. Momentary concentration is you're allowing your point of attention to shift, like when we shift to another object of meditation and then shift back to the breath. We're shifting, so it's not single pointed anymore, but it's still concentration because we're not getting caught in thought. We're not getting wrapped up in thinking. So in that sense, it's concentration, but it's a different kind of concentration. So in this practice, we develop both kinds. We develop a single point of concentration initially, and then the momentary is to be able to move around from one object to another. And sometimes you can go through multiple objects of meditation without ever going back to the breath. And at the same time, without getting lost in thought or without getting too agitated or too stirred up. But other times you need to go back to the breath just to restabilize. So it just depends on whatever's happening. But if you can move, if you have very strong momentary concentration, you can move from one object to another object to another object, another object. all without ever getting lost, without ever getting captured by any of those things. So that's momentary concentration. So in this practice, we're cultivating both, and both of them are useful. But staying with single point of concentration tends to get you really calm. So if you ever really want to just get calm, just stay with single point of concentration for the whole meditation session, and you'll get as calm as you can get just from doing that. But the other thing is that calm can arise from the seeing. So when you do the investigation, calm can arise from that. If you see something that allows something to release, that letting go to happen, then calm will arise from that as well. So calm arises from two sources. It arises from the concentration, but also it arises from the letting go.
Well, it's neat that you can use these different tools just as it fits for you and that day, that moment.
Exactly.
Rather than just getting into a rote, same old, same old.
Yeah. And that's the skill of this practice, is learning all the tools and then how to use them moment to moment. And in this class, what I try to do each class is talk about a particular kind of teaching, but then how to access that teaching in the meditation. So today I talked a little bit about, when you came to the part where you're trying to support the skillful qualities of mind, I talked about using a single word like contentment or ease or something like that. Any word will do, any word that feels good to you, that has a feeling of a skillful quality of mind, you can bring that, whether it's loving kindness or compassion, or you can use a phrase, you can use a word, whatever works, just to generate the feeling of a skillful state of mind. And I've done a lot of that with different kinds of phrases that I have. Like I use the phrase "at home and at rest" sometimes. I just say that to myself, "at home and at rest," just to sort of calm down into the moment. If things are getting, so any kind of phrase will work that feels good to you. I've got a lot of them that I used over the years. And because I've used them a lot, as soon as I say them, it generates that sort of response, that feeling. And
during my work day, occasionally I'll kind of have a feeling come up like, oh, I want to go home, or something like that. And working from home these past few months, it kind of stopped me and said, you are home. So I pulled this Thich Nhat Hanh calligraphy out of a book that said, there is no way home, home is the way. And I put that up on my wall. And that's really helped me remember that I can be at home in every moment.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a good example, because when you're at work and you have the thought, I want to go home. What is that? It's wanting. Wanting has arisen.
Yeah.
What does wanting feel like? You can do that just sitting at your desk at work. You can experience what wanting feels like. And then come up with a way of settling into where you are at your desk and being comfortable where you are, and just sort of letting that wanting just kind of fade away.
Nice.
Because you recognize it as unskillful. Okay. So that's the way it works. I hope you find it useful.